The Pembrook Academy for Gifted Children, a short story by J.J. Hanna, published in 2020 at authorjjhanna.com. Brandon looked at the list of names, reviewing the addresses before him and glancing up at the trailer park he was parked at. This one kid had potential. Maxwell Jones, 3 years old, a perfectly healthy son of a single mother, abandoned by his father when he was 1. The guy didn't even send child support, and Maxwell's mother didn't press him. She was struggling to make ends meet. She'd take the bribe, he'd take the kid, and he'd give them both a better life than they were set up for now. Neither would want for anything. Well, except for Maxwell. He might long for his mother, and maybe Lizzie too. It would all depend on how well she behaved and if she looked for her son once she figured it out. Brandon got out of his car and walked up to the door of the old silver trailer and knocked. He could hear Maxwell playing inside and his mother Lizzie's footsteps as she came to open the door. She wore a waitress's apron and uniform from the diner a few miles in town, and when he looked past her wiry shoulders, he saw stacks of $1 bills on the small trailer's table where she'd been counting her tips. Her hair was graying prematurely in a 50s-style ponytail, and she had a stern look on her face and the kind of sallow cheeks and wrinkles that came with a lifetime of struggle. "What do you want?" she asked, a nervous hand keeping firm hold on the door. "Are you Lizzie Jones?" "Yeah." "I'm a representative for the Pembrook Academy for Gifted Children, and I'd like to speak with you about an educational opportunity we have for your son." "Pembrook sounds expensive. I'm not... Please, let me tell you about it. We'd like to offer him a full scholarship at our boarding academy for young minds. Can I come in?" She looked Brandon up and down and finally stepped out of the way, welcoming him into the tiny trailer. Maxwell got up and ran over on wobbly toddler legs and wrapped his arm around her hips. She bent over and scooped him up, absent-mindedly bouncing with him, though she seemed to be struggling under his weight. He was almost too heavy for her to handle. She gestured to the table and brushed the stacks of $1 bills bundled in rubber bands over to one side, her side, and set Maxwell on her lap. "So, what is the school?" she asked. "As I said before, it's a training academy for gifted children. There's a 5-to-1 student-to-teacher ratio maintained at all times." He checked his notes, as if he needed to. "Maxwell, isn't it?" "Just Max." "Of course. Max would get to grow up traveling the world and studying languages and cultures and job opportunities, studying trades and professions and exploring as soon as he can. The world would be open to him, all expenses paid." She looked down at her little boy. "He's awfully young for all that." They start in a live-in preschool and go from kindergarten through 3rd grade here in the States. In 4th grade they begin their travels, and by high school our students are equipped to enter into a trade profession. By college they're prepared to specialize if they choose to. This is a completely free ride at one of the most prestigious academies in the country. She shook her head. "It sounds too good to be true." He glanced at the pile of tips on the table and let his eyes wander to her disheveled kitchen. Empty cans filling the trash can. "You'd only have yourself to feed, Lizzie. Your son would be well cared for. You'll get monthly updates and photos. For the first month, we suggest no phone calls to help with the separation anxiety, but you can send letters that will be read to him until he can read himself. And after the first month, you can call and talk with him." "Can I come visit him?" "Of course, depending on the course schedule. Our goal is not to take your son from you, but instead to help you both into a happier life free of cost to you." She was quiet for a moment, taking his little hands in her fingers and bouncing his arms up and down in a version of patty cake. He laughed, the first sound Brandon had heard him make while he'd been there. "Where do you get the funding for this?" "We're a government-funded program that qualifies as a private school. It's the best of both worlds." "Can I have time to think it over?" she asked. "Of course. I'll leave my card with you. Just don't take too long, or we'll have to fill a spot with another lucky child. You have 3 days to decide, since the new quarter is coming up and he's the right age to fit in with this upcoming class." Brandon stood and placed a business card on the table, offering his hand to her. "Call me when you've made up your mind." She shook his hand and saw him out the door. "Bye-bye," Maxwell said, waving at him as he went to his car. He waved back. "Bye, Max." 2 days later, his phone rang with Lizzie on the other end, accepting his offer. 3 days later, he was back, having Lizzie sign a transfer of custody statement disguised as a release form. He strapped Max into the car seat in the back and waved at Lizzie as he drove away, looking back at his new ward. 4 days later, Maxwell was settling into the nursery nowhere near the address Lizzie Jones had on the paperwork and the pamphlets. 5 days later, Maxwell was starting to respond to his new name, Lucas. 1 month later, Lizzie Jones tried to call the school and found a discontinued line. By the time Lizzie figured out what she'd fallen for, her son was long gone. No pictures had been sent. She was still living in the trailer, finding it harder and harder to find or keep a job, and she had a sinking feeling that she'd fallen for the worst con she'd ever encountered. 3 years later, Lucas was still showing promise for this business, and he moved on when his classmates did not. 12 years later, Lucas passed all of his martial arts classes with flying colors and was showing interest in electrical engineering. Brandon watched him grow, watched him develop into the person he'd always known he could be, and smiled at his ward. By the time Lucas graduated into the specialization fields, Lizzie Jones had died of poverty. As far as Brandon was concerned, Lucas never needed to know where he came from so long as he kept heading where he was going, straight to the top of the entire organization. If you enjoyed that story, please check out the rest of the short stories available at www.authorjjhanna.com or elsewhere on this channel. If you want to get these stories and behind-the-scenes information about where the stories came from, please consider joining JJ's Patreon family at www.patreon.com/jjhanna. Thanks for listening. Come back next month for more stories like this. Until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.